Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 45 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. We give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 8 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. Week 8, that sucks so much. We're like halfway through. That really sucks. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, it's our Friday show. We have injuries to talk about. We have our all boom and all bust teams, and we don't know most of our players. I think I know two of yours, and you might know two of mine.
I don't know any of yours.
I thought you did because
I know 2 years. That's right.
You have to know two, and I have to know.
I
two.
forgot your two.
I think I know three of yours because I had to change my three receivers.
Okay.
But that's okay. And then we have our flex on him segment to end the show. So fun show coming up for us at least. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and there were some season changing injuries this week, which is
that's the interesting thing is you normally don't get like we do this podcast 4 times a week now, and that's something we decided to do for this season. And some of our shows are a little bit shorter. I think our Thursday show yesterday went about like 13 minutes or something like that, but that's okay because we talked about stuff yesterday that would have made this show even longer. So now we have the time to kind of breathe and then and now we just talk about everything that we want to talk about today leading into the weekend. So there's news coming out every day, especially at this time of year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. We do the show 4 times a week, plus a live show. The 4 times a week is the audio and video versions of the recorded show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Today is our Friday show. It's our biggest of the week. It's our hour-long show that we prepare you for the upcoming fantasy football week. You can find the audio recordings of these shows on all audio streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor. Basically, anywhere where you find a podcast, you could find us, the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We'd really appreciate that. If you'd rather watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, and watch this video there. You could hit that like button on every video that you watch, including this one. You would hit the subscribe button to subscribe to the channel. Hit the little notification bell button so you get to get notifications from us every time we go live, every time a video drops. Speaking of going live, we have a 5th show every week. It's our live show. It's so much fun. Sunday mornings, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Me and Nick love setting that alarm for 8 o'clock so we can get up and talk fantasy football with you guys. We give you a full game-by-game preview. If we get through the game-by-games, which we normally do, we'll talk about the big injuries that could affect that day in that game. But the more important part of that show is to answer your fantasy questions. We've gotten a lot of love this year. We never had a show that was really dead in terms of questions, and we appreciate that because if we're waking up early, our goal is to answer your questions. So the more questions, the better. The more people that join, the better. There's no stupid questions. There's definitely better questions than others. If you ask us, should I start Alvin Kamara or Michael Carter? I'm just throwing 2 names out there, but point being, like, if you ask us questions like that, yes, we're going to make it a short answer, but there are better questions out there. But we appreciate every question. We appreciate you guys joining and hanging out with us. So that shows every Sunday, including this Sunday, YouTube, Facebook, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, Twitter, PrimeTimeFFPod. You can watch and comment and join in all those possible ways. Make sure you share that link with your friends. Let your friends know to join us Sundays, 8:30 a.m. It's going to go right into that London game, 9:30, Denver Broncos and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, man. Let's ride, baby. Let's ride.
Oh, yeah, let's ride.
All right. And you can follow us and interact with us on social media. PrimeTime FFPod on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and then PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. So the big news of the week. Nick finally gets a Bengals take.
No. You're not doing that. Nope.
Yep. You get a Bengals take, right? Yep. What do you mean, no?
Nope.
I
didn't predict Jamar Chase would get hurt.
Well, he's not going to finish.
I didn't even think he'd be a bust. I said T. Higgins would be a bust.
Well, now T. Higgins is not going to be a bust.
Oh, we'll see.
All right. Jamar Chase has a hip injury. He's going to be sidelined for 4 to 6 weeks. Could go on the IR, which I believe is 6 weeks, if I'm correct on that, right? IR is 6 weeks.
3 weeks IR.
3 weeks IR. Okay, so he's probably going to end up.
They shortened it at the start of the pandemic.
Their bye, I believe, is also week 10. So if he did go on IR, he would it'd be 2 games and then the bye.
8, 9, and then bye week. So that's guaranteed at least.
Yeah. I think he does miss the next 2 weeks for sure. It's a hip flexor sprain. He's going to get a second opinion on it. The injury isn't even fully diagnosed. That's part of the problem. But surgery is not expected. Could happen, not expected. So best case scenario, he's back in 4 weeks. He misses 2 games and he misses and then the bye week. Worst case scenario is he's out for the season. So we're going to play with the information that we have right now where he misses 6 weeks. So he would miss weeks 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He'd be back for your fantasy playoffs, which I believe would be, do we have 19? We have 18 weeks now, right? Or 19.
Week 17 is the championship. Week 15 is the first playoff week.
So he would be back for your playoffs. So Nick, first off, huge blow to if you have Jamar Chase, probably a reason why your record's good or why you're still in your, in the hunt for the playoffs. But you can't drop him. You can throw him on your IR slot, but you can't drop him. With that said, how do you think this affects the Bengals from a fantasy standpoint?
So I said something a couple days ago, which was I am not talking Bengals anymore.
You have to now.
This has changed because now I have to. So I will keep it short and sweet. T. Higgins, slight upgrade, not massive. Tyler Boyd, massive upgrade. Hayden Hurst, massive upgrade. And Joe Mixon should be managing the clock more. They shouldn't be trying to go win every game with 50 Joe Burrow passes. So short, sweet. I think Jamar Chase is going to miss at least that 4 mark, unless if the second diagnosis turns out it's just I don't know, hip injuries, but unless it's just soreness and he's going to be out like 2 weeks, I think you're not going to see Jamar Chase until after the bye week at the earliest. So.
Yep, I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said. I think that they should kind of change their format of their offense a little bit. I think they have to run it more through Joe Mixon rather than Joe Burrow. That's not a knock on Burrow at all, but that's just Mixon's really freaking talented. And his points per game have been increasing every single week. I know people have been super duper high on Mixon, but I think he's a top 10 running back on the season, I want to say, fantasy wise. And he's at over 15 fantasy points, I think in 3 out of the last 4, something like that. So Mixon isn't the problem. The offensive line is improved. And on top of that, the defense has been spectacular. The defense is good against everything. And they don't have a ton of star players, which is really interesting. They don't have Aaron Donalds. They don't have, Stephon Gilmore's. They don't have, Bobby Wagner's or anything. Like, they don't have super duper star players, but their defense still hasn't allowed a touchdown through in the second half through 7 weeks. The points per game is great. They're good against basically every position. So I think if they run the ball and play defense, they're going to be fine. Will they beat a team like Kansas City without Jamar Chase? Probably not. But I think with every other game, they should have no problem with it. From a fantasy standpoint, though, then Mixon gets a bump. I think Joe Burrow gets a slight downgrade. I would also give Hayden Hurst a bump. Targets have to go somewhere, and Burrow does like Hayden Hurst. So I think that makes Hurst a more attractive play.
Yep.
We'll talk more about this on Monday. On Monday, we'll do our weekend recap, and we'll preview Monday Night Football. And it's Halloween. Maybe I'll dress up. We'll see. I do have a costume.
You will be the only one.
Oh, come on. You're no fun. You have to dress up.
I don't have to do anything.
You should dress up.
I don't have to talk Bengals if I don't want to talk Bengals.
Oh, you do, because you run a fantasy podcast, and the Bengals are one of 32 teams, and I have a lot of
spoiler alert. There will be no Bengal on my all boom or all bust team for the rest of the season.
Come on.
Alert. Nope. Won't touch
I bet. Ridiculous. All right. Other big news of the day, which we were going to lead the show off with, but obviously couldn't. Kadarius Toney was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a conditional 3rd-round pick and a 6th. So that 3rd, I guess, can become a 1st or 2nd, probably.
No. So conditional 3rd means that it is a 3rd unless something happens. So I don't know. I didn't look at the breakdown.
There's probably an injury clause in there somewhere.
So it's typically if you play X number of snaps, catch X number of balls, hit X number of yards. So it'll depend on the usage. I know the Eagles got a massive pick because Carson Wentz stayed incredibly healthy, and I think they had a conditional 1st or conditional 2nd.
Okay.
Which winded up converting because
right.
Wentz was healthy.
Right. What was Tony's injury? Was it?
It was hamstring.
It's hamstring, yeah. And he's still not healthy technically. So the report I also saw earlier is that the trade was made because the Giants front office wanted him to rest until the bye week, and Tony didn't want to. He's definitely not playing for Kansas City this week. So he has a chance to play next week, I guess.
They're on bye. That's why he's not playing this week.
Yeah, you're right. Good. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Tony to Kansas City from a fantasy standpoint? First off, it doesn't affect the Giants to me at all because they don't throw their wide receivers.
Yeah,
and nobody relevant. But for the Chiefs, what are your thoughts about that at least?
I mean, for Kansas City, obviously the clear upgrade is Mahomes. I mean, it's hard to get much better, but like his situation has just gotten better. Kadarius Toney, like I know he didn't play a lot, and we didn't get to see much of him due to injury his first year and like his second year in the league. His role on the Giants was literally Tyreek Hill. That's exactly the role he was playing. I'm not saying he is Tyreek Hill. I'm not saying he's as talented as Tyreek Hill, but he is a very talented player, and that was the kind of play, like, that's the style that they use Toney for. So, like, if you ask me who a Walmart version of Tyreek Hill is, it would have been Kadarius Toney. He's younger, he's not healthier, but he's younger. He has the same abilities as Tyreek, just he's not as big of a burner. He doesn't have, like there's things with Tyreek that'll never be matched in the NFL again. Kadarius Toney hits a lot of those, just not at the degree. I think Toney should be rostered in all of your leagues at this point. After the bye week, you're not going to play him week one off the hamstring injury. Like he's not going to come out there. But if Andy Reid said, we scored 44 points against the number one defense in football, and we needed this player, that tells you something. That tells you that Kadarius Toney is going to have a role in this offense. What his role is going to be, I'm not sure. But I am sure that Andy Reid has a plan, and when Andy Reid has a plan with Patrick Mahomes for the last 5 years, it has worked. So just trust him.
Yeah, I would roster Kadarius Toney. I picked him up, and I think in 3 out of my 5 leagues today.
That's what I did.
I definitely roster him. Definitely wouldn't play him for a couple weeks to see what his role is, but I think Juju's the one that's in most in terms of losing fantasy points here. Kelsey's going to be fine. Like Kelsey's untouchable at this point. Mm-hmm. I wanted to say this, but check your leagues for Tyler Boyd. He was dropped in one of my leagues this week and unfortunately picked up on Wednesday, so I couldn't even go get him. But look at your leagues for Tyler Boyd because he's going to win a lot of games for you guys in the next 6 weeks. Another bit of news here. Devontae Adams has missed the last 2 practices with a pretty bad case of the flu. He's still expected to play, and other players on the Raiders have also missed time for the flu. Not much to talk about here, but just be careful with the Raiders right now. Because if the flu's going around there, anybody can get it leading up to Sunday. Watch the reports and just be cautious.
Pay attention.
Yep. Lastly, Bill Belichick finally gave some clarity to us. I think he said that Mac Jones will be the starter for Week 8 against the Jets. I wouldn't be shocked if Belichick put in Mac Jones for a play and then put in Zappy because that's a Belichick thing. But I think Mac Jones is going to start and play until he plays really badly if he does.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had no problem. The team said that they didn't know the plan was for Bailey Zappi to come in on Monday Night Football, and they had no problem doing it. So, he had 2 drives. They both ended poorly. They went down 10-0, and then they brought in Zappi. And the Jets defense is better than the Bears defense. I'm not saying the Jets are going to shut them down. I am the resident Jets fan. Disclaimer. But the fact is, like, if Mac Jones is getting shut down, like, there's a very good shot you watch Zappy come right back in. I wouldn't be surprised. It's a very Belichick thing to do.
Let me ask this because this is a pretty important game for the Jets season, I think. Which quarterback do you want the Patriots to play? This is Jets fan Nick I'm talking to. Who do you want to see the Patriots trot out there?
Who would I rather see?
Yeah,
I'd rather see Mac Jones.
I agree.
Because I haven't seen Mac Jones's ability to play make, and I think that's the one thing he's going to struggle to do against the Jets defense, who's very physical. They're very fast off the edge. Like, you need to buy time, and Zappy proved through those 2 weeks that he is able to roll out of the pocket, make a play on the move. Like, Mac Jones can't do that. He's a pure pocket passer.
Yep. All right, on to the injury report of things. We're recording late Thursday night, about 8 o'clock before Thursday Night Football. So this is the most up-to-date news that we can provide to you. Obviously, Adam Schefter will have better news as Friday goes along, but this is what we can do for you guys. Did not practice Thursday or Wednesday. Deebo Samuel, hamstring. Michael Thomas, toe. Ezekiel Elliott, knee. He's basically already been ruled out. Not officially, but he won't play. DK Metcalf, knee. He's probably not going to play. Chuba Hubbard, ankle. Alan Lazard with a shoulder injury says he probably won't play. It's coming from his mouth. David Njoku, ankle, said he's going to see about Monday, but I'm not trusting him in my lineup because he's supposed to be out 2 to 5 weeks, so you can't start him on Monday Night Football. And Jarvis Landry with the ankle injury. Nick, I mean, none of this stuff surprises me except for Deebo. Tyler Lockett played last week after not practicing, I think, the entire week with a hamstring injury. Deebo's been an absolute killer on the Rams, against the Rams, I should say. So that does worry me a tiny bit. I think he gets a questionable tag, and I think he plays. But again, until Shanahan speaks to the media tomorrow and until we learn more, that's one that is a little eye-popping to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is a little eye-popping. I know Debo has, outside of last year, he has extensive injury history, and that was a big reason why he was drafted so late in drafts last year. So I'm not sure. I do think Ayuk, if you have him, you probably have to consider starting him if he was a hit or miss guy for you, if he was one of those flex on them players.
All right. Limited for Thursday and Wednesday. Some of these players were not limited, but on Wednesday, but definitely Thursday. So limited Thursday. James Conner with the ribs. Darrell Williams with the knee. Unfortunately for your Benjamin owners like myself, he's probably going to be irrelevant come Sunday.
Yep.
Dalton Schultz with the knee, didn't practice yesterday, but he seems good to go. I think Wednesday was a rest injury. Mr. Limited, Russell Wilson, he was limited both on the plane and on the practice field, apparently doing...
he wasn't limited. He did 4 hours of cardio on the plane.
Yeah, he did 4 hours of cardio on the plane when they were all trying to sleep. Here's Mr. Limited probably saying stupid-ass motivational quotes and doing high knees.
Broncos country, let's fly.
Let's fly. Let's fly. God damn it, man. What a scene. What a scene, man. Oh, God. It'd be funny if they get punked by the Jaguars. It's a home game for the Jaguars, too, by the way. They love them in London. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a limited practice. He's still technically in concussion protocol, even though he didn't have a concussion. He should play. Darren Waller with a hamstring injury. I'm seeing conflicting reports as if he practiced on Wednesday. It seems like he had 2 limited practices, though. Darrell Henderson was back at practice today with an illness. Raheem Mostert was limited on Thursday, not Wednesday, with a knee injury. So that's one to watch with his injury history. But obviously he was limited, not out. Jalen Waddle with the shoulder. I wouldn't be shocked if he had some kind of quick surgery in the offseason. He's dealt with the shoulder for a couple of weeks, but hasn't limited his fantasy production. And Ryan Tannehill with an ankle. I ran through them. Anybody that you want to touch on or?
No, not really. I think you could come ask Sunday if you have any questions.
Yep. And lastly, for the full practices, DeAndre Swift knee looks good to go to make his return. Derek Carr with the back. I see Elijah more in the notes, but I think that's from yesterday. Derek Carr with the back injury. He's good to go. Hunter Renfrow with a hip and Tyler Lockett with a hammy. So his hammy was not a serious one, and he's good to go. All righty, let's go to our Week 8 all boom teams. Players who think you're going to boom in Week 8. Nick, who's your all boom quarterback?
I am going with the division rival Tua Tagovailoa. This week he has the Detroit Lions, and the Giants have the Detroit Lions have allowed the 4th most points to the quarterback position. They have a horrendous secondary. They looked very good against Dak, coming off a hand injury and coming off a bye. They are not going to look good against those weapons in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle if Jalen Waddle is playing. There's no one that's going to hang with those 2 receivers. Those 2 receivers, even though that they had weeks with backup quarterbacks, Tyreek Hill has the most receiving yards in the NFL at the moment. Jalen Waddle is number 4 in receiving yards at the moment. So both of them are having no problem not interfering with each other's workload. Tua will have no problem producing against the secondary. In healthy games, he's averaging over 330 yards per game, and he has a total of 8 touchdowns. I know one of there's the big outlier game of the 6 touchdowns, but either way, he put up those numbers against a harder defense than this one. So I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go trust Tua this week. It's probably the first week where you'll see the boom Tua since you saw that massive week. I'm not saying 6 touchdowns, but I'm saying it's going to be a good day for him.
And I think Tua is undefeated this year when not injured. So
yep, he's 4-0.
Okay. Yep. So my all boom quarterback is the Red Rifle. It's Andy Dalton. And I would have loved this pick a lot more if his receivers were healthy. I really thought that Michael Thomas and Landry would have been healthy for this one because it's been like 3 weeks. Michael Thomas has to have like a black crusted up foot or something because I don't know what's wrong with him. It's taken out for so many weeks. But anyway, even without them injured, Andy Dalton is facing the Raiders defense that's allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Last week, Andy Dalton had 30 fantasy points after throwing 2 pick sixes, which got him -4. So the fact that he's played a couple weeks with his team, they trust him more. He passes a lot to Kamara, which Jameis doesn't do. Chris Olave looks like a stud. He's a double-digit fantasy points in every single week. Juwan Johnson looked really good last week. And as long as Dalton throws like 2-3 touchdown passes, I think he has a really good week. Now, is he going to be a top 10? Probably not. But I mean, if you needed to fill a quarterback this week, whether you have Mahomes on bye or you don't want to play Aaron Rodgers against Baltimore, against Buffalo, or you drafted Russell Wilson. Like I would play Andy Dalton over all these guys. So I think it's a solid play. It is risky, but I think he's a solid enough play. Based on his production and how he's improved with this offense over the last few weeks. So who's your first running back boom of the week?
I had this guy before I knew that his counterpart was hurt. I have Tony Pollard. I thought he was going to boom even with Zeke out there. So seeing no Zeke just gives me an even better case to put him as my RB1 on the week. Not RB1 on the week, but my RB1 for my all boom bust team.
Yep.
I do think he is going to have a top 10 week this week. He is Mr. Breakaway Speed, as coined by the one and only Skip Bayless. And the fact is, his usage has been going up and up and up over the last few weeks, and they are beginning to trust him a lot more than they are trusting Zeke. Last week with Dak, he put up 13 points, 12 touches. Zeke had 15. They did pretty much a 50-50 split on the timeshare on the field, but the thing that got Zeke to the more points was he got 2 touchdowns because he gets that goal line work. This week, with no Zeke, it has to be Tony Pollard's workload near the goal line. It has to be a Tony Pollard week. Zeke doesn't have that same ceiling that Pollard has. Pollard has that breakaway speed. He's got that monster ability. He has pass catching ability, and now he's going to get some goal line work, something you're not used to seeing him get. It should be an all-in day for the Bears, who just traded away their star defensive lineman and ranked currently 27th to opposing fantasy running backs. It is a perfect situation for him. I highly recommend, if you have him on your team, this is why you drafted him, to be a handcuff or to be someone else's handcuff. This is where you leverage him. This is where you play him. This is where he booms.
Right. My first running back boom of the week is Joe Mixon, who I spoke about a couple minutes ago. Joe Mixon has a double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight weeks, and in 3 of those weeks, he had over 15 fantasy points. This is in standard ESPN PPR leagues. On top of that, he's facing the Cleveland Browns on Monday night, who's allowed the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. This is a scary matchup for the Cleveland Browns because it's on Halloween, and Joe Mixon's going to give him some tricks over there. It's going to be a treat for you if you're Joe Mixon. I'm just pulling as many Halloween puns as I possibly can at this point. On top of all that, Jamar Chase is out. They should run the offense through Joe Mixon. In my football watcher's opinion, I don't own Mixon in any leagues. I actually own Higgins in a league. So I want them to feed Higgins, but I think the smart football decision is to run this through Mixon for the next few weeks. And there's a really great opportunity to do so. Control the clock, play defense, win the football game. Who is your second running back boom of the week?
Oh, I went with one division guy at my quarterback. I'm going with a different one. I'm going with big old Devin Singletary. And my favorite stat of the week, 10.5-point favorites against the Green Bay Packers. First time in Aaron Rodgers' career, he was an underdog by double-digit points. Vegas is saying they're winning, and they're winning big. And you know what happens when you win big? You run that goddamn football. In the big games against tough opponents, the Bills are running more and more. And in the 2 toughest games this season, Devin Singletary had his most points in each of those games. Those are up against Kansas City and Baltimore. And the fact of the matter is the Green Bay Packers are just as bad against the run as those 2 teams. On top of that, he has over 5 targets in half of his games this season. And, of course, he gets to come off the bye, which means an extra week of preparation, an extra week of rest, and an extra week to go boom against those sucker cheeseheads.
All right. My second running back boom of the week is Raheem Mostert facing those Detroit Lions. And I really wanted to put 2 as my boom quarterback, but I don't like doing stacks like Nick does. Because at that point I could just boom an entire team every week because some of these defenses are really bad.
I love the stack. You got to love the stack.
Nick does love the stack. The Lions have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs throughout the entire season. On top of that, they've allowed 10 touchdowns to running backs this season, and they've only played 6 games. So they're allowing a little over 1 touchdown to a running back every single week. On top of that, Raheem Mostert has looked really good. In his last 4 games, he's had over double-digit fantasy points in 3 out of 4 games. So this is a great matchup. He's the running back 1 over there. Trust him. Play him. This is a good week for Mostert. Who's your running back 1 of the week? Your wide receiver 1 of the week. Your first wide receiver boom of the week, I should say.
I am going with who has been my favorite receiver in the NFL
DJ Moore.
For years. I am going with DeAndre Hopkins. I've been arguing for years and years and years, up until last year, that he was the best receiver in football, and he came back and he proved why he was ranked number 1 for so long. Came back, 14 targets, 10 catches, over 100 yards, and he was an absolute beast in his first game off the suspension. Now he gets 10 days rest because he played Thursday Night Football, and he goes up against Minnesota, who is currently allowing over 400 yards per a game, not to the quarterback, to entire teams. And guess what? The Cardinals have 2 injured running backs, which means that they are going to need to pass this ball. Minnesota is going to go up. They're going to be playing from behind, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to continue to get those double-digit targets and have that double-digit type of week. There's a very good chance he also catches a touchdown. If he replicates last week's stats with a touchdown, he goes for 27, and he's the wide receiver 2 on the week.
I like your take, but Call of Duty comes out tomorrow. So like this is the big week for Kyler's to see exactly what happens out of that. And note about that, Pat Mahomes tweeted today, Call of Duty comes out tonight. You guys want to play? And he tagged like Kelsey, MVS, and a couple others.
Did you see the thing that Juju said or no?
No, what did Juju say?
So Juju said the reason why their chemistry was so good against the Niners is because MVS, Juju, Kelsey, and Mahomes got a big win on Call of Duty the night before, so they all felt really good going into the game.
This has to be a rib.
Rob that chemistry.
This has to be a rib on Kyler Murray. It can't not be a rib at this point. They know what they're doing, and I love it. My first wide receiver boom of the week may not even play. I have Deebo Samuel, and he's a Ram killer. I said it a few weeks ago when I boomed him. He's a Ram killer. He's averaging 30 fantasy points in ESPN standard scoring leagues. It's not even bonuses. This is 30 fantasy points in ESPN standard. This is no 100-yard bonus, no super duper touchdown long bonus. This is just standard PPR ESPN standard leagues. He's averaging 30 points against the Rams in the last 4 games. That's absurd. That's such an absurd number. On top of that, to make things worse for the Rams, they've allowed the 11th most fantasy points to wide receivers. That number's gone down a little bit as the season goes on, but they also face like the Panthers, and they face some bad teams to help spike that number, but they've not been good against wide receivers at all. Now, again, the hamstring injury. If Deebo's out, then I'm just slotting Ayuk in here, and I give myself a pat on the back. But Deebo is my first wide receiver choice because he's a Ram killer. Who's your second wide receiver boom of the week?
I'm so excited for this one, Nick.
Oh, boy.
Broncos country, let's fly. Courtland Sutton in London. Now, I will say I'm going to give myself one disclaimer. If Russell Wilson did not throw off this man's sleep schedule on the plane, he should absolutely have no problem booming against those terrible Jaguars defense. Right now, they're a middle-of-the-pack secondary who has been worse in the last 4 games than they have been in the first 3. Through the first 3 games of the season, the Jaguars were leading the NFL in turnovers. Since then, they only have 1. The one thing that the Russell Wilson-led Broncos have been able to do well is get the ball to the red zone, and they haven't been able to score in the red zone. Well, guess what? Jacksonville's red zone defense has been absolutely terrible the last 4 weeks of the season, and guess what? The only reason he looked bad last week because he got clamped by the one and only Sauce Gardner. Nick, who's in Jacksonville secondary that can hang with Courtland Sutton? That's right, absolutely nobody. Courtland Sutton, monster week, monster week, monster week. We're going to be live. We're going to be live on Sunday, little plug, and we'll probably are going to go into that London game, and you're going to watch me cheering all that for that 30 minutes that we're in that game for Courtland Sutton with big plays. I'm so excited to watch him in London.
My second wide receiver boom of the week is Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've been waiting for it. He had a point last week and then got concussed. The Tua rule got him. But anyway, he's facing those Dolphins who have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Wide receivers that have had over 14. A couple wide receiver ones in here, but let me list them off for you. Rashad Bateman, Isaiah McKenzie, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, and George Pickens all had over 14 fantasy points against the Rams. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, against the Dolphins. I think Amon-Ra has over 14 as well and adds to that list. Who's your first flex player of the week?
So I don't know if I'm really allowed to use this guy because, he's been so dominant, and I know, we've been praising him.
Why is he in your flex then, out of curiosity? I don't even know who it is, but why is he in your flex if he's this dominant?
Because he's been so dominant. He should be, he should be higher. I just didn't reorder them, but I'm going with Chris Olave. I feel like it's a scapegoat to put him here at this point, but in his 6 games that he's played, he's averaging 16 fantasy points over the last 4. All 4 of them have been above 15. He's getting over 9 targets per game, and right now he's on pace for a 1,400-yard season as a rookie. That is on the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase level. And his better games have been with the Red Rifle, not with Jameis Winston, who Nick also has on his all boom this week. Vegas ranks the top 10. The Vegas Raiders, who they're going up against, ranked top 10 in allowing the most points to the wide receiver position. So once again, he has another good matchup. So there's no reason to fade him, not like you were going to anyway. And there hasn't been a cornerback matchup to scare me away from playing Chris Olave. So do you trust the Red Rifle most weeks? No. Nick trusts him this week, and I completely agree with him. I trust Olave this week. There's one week I am going to be scared, which is championship week, because he is going to get shadowed by Darius Slay. But up until then, Chris Olave, we will keep talking high about you.
All right. My first flex boom of the week is DJ Moore, who seems to be on this list every other week at this point. Last week, DJ Moore had 19 fantasy points. Finally had over 15. On top of that, the Falcons defense has allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers through 8 weeks or 7 weeks. I believe in 4 of those, they've allowed 2 receivers to go over 15 fantasy points. They've allowed a lot. Nick, do you know the PJ Walker stats? I know you had them last week, but DJ Moore does play better with PJ Walker.
I know them from last year. I don't have this year counted.
That's fine, yeah.
In the 5 games from last year, DJ Moore was put up a total of over 400 yards in those 5 games with him as the starter.
So averaging about 85 roughly.
And I think he had, I want to say 8 catches per game or 10 targets per game, one of the two.
So there you go. So point being, DJ Moore's a really great play this week against the Falcons. I don't know how many weeks I could tell you he's a great play, but this week is definitely one of them. The Falcons, they're really bad against receivers. They have nobody to guard anybody. So who's your second flex of the week?
I'm going with Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett last week was dealing with the hamstring. I didn't think he'd play, and it turns out he looked pretty good. He did play, and he was practicing all this week, but who's not practicing his counterpart in DK Metcalf? Tyler Lockett will assume the wide receiver 1 role. And I know they're going up against the Giants, and the Giants are pretty good to the wide receiver position, but Tyler Lockett has been very good this year. Last week, he put up 7 catches without DK Metcalf as the wide receiver 1. So even when he's getting the cornerback 1 on the team, he's still putting up production. And 2 weeks ago, when he got the hammy injury, he put up his worst game of the year. Outside of that, his floor has been 11 points all year and is averaging 7.5 targets per game. So without DK Metcalf, you can only assume he's going to get better as he heals up from the hamstring injury, as he assumes the wide receiver 1 role. I know the Giants defense might look like a fade for him, but I'm going to go trust the wide receiver 1 that hasn't showed me a reason not to trust him this year.
Are you worried at least a little bit about the Giants defense has been pretty stout?
No, because if the Giants defense is stout, that means that the Seahawks are going to have to play from behind, because the Penny can only do so much in that offense against that front 7. So it's either going to be a good game script for Lockett, or he's going to get out early and get them to a good lead. So
all right.
I don't think there's a way where he will absolutely flop this week. I think his floor is going to be safe enough.
All right. My second boom of the week is a guy I've been high on since the offseason. That's Devontae Smith. The last time I almost boomed him on my all boom team, he went for like 40 points or something like that, and I took the harder way out. But anyway, in 3 of his last 4 games, he's had 15 plus fantasy points. On top of that, he's facing the Steelers defense that's allowed the second most points to wide receivers this season. Great matchup. Going to get the volume. Eagles coming off the bye. Good week for Devontae Smith. Good week for the Eagles. Play Miles Sanders. Play Devontae Smith. Play A.J. Brown. Play Hurts. Play Goddard. Good week for the Eagles. I'm putting Devontae Smith on my flex, though. Who's your tight end boom of the week? I know I took the guy you probably wanted to use, but who's your tight end boom of the week?
I am going with Greg Dulcich, the tight end for the Denver Broncos. Now, I didn't do my normal quarterback, running back, or quarterback, receiver, quarterback, tight end stack. I went with the wide receiver tight end stack this week. But Greg Dulcich has been pretty good. He's only played 2 games in his entire career. He's averaging 12 points per game, and both of them, the floor was 11 points. So he's been pretty solid. And Russ does love throwing to the tight ends near the goal line. I do remember in Seattle, Gerald Everett, Will Dissly, even Jimmy Grandpa getting some of those touchdown passes. So I know Russ likes the tight end. I know he's been pretty good through 2 weeks, and he's only a rookie. So why against Jacksonville am I not going to trust him to put up another double-digit game? I think it's just a great opportunity for him. I think he's going to be solid. I know it's the all boom, so maybe me saying a solid tight end is isn't fair, but it's very hard to predict.
I think tight ends, yeah. The booms are Kelsey and
boom
Mark
is
Andrews.
10 points.
Yeah,
10 points is
basically.
good.
Yep, exactly. I have a guy who's consistently scores 10 points a lot, and that's going to be Zach Ertz. He's a double-digit fantasy points every single week, except for last week against the Saints, who are the second best team against tight ends. They're really good at guarding tight ends. So rough matchup, and I'm not too worried about it. Now he's facing the Minnesota Vikings, who have allowed the sixth most fantasy points to tight ends. This should be an offensive showcase. I hope it's an offensive showcase because I got fantasy players on both sides, and Zach Ertz should have a really nice game over there. Let's go to our all bust teams for week 8. Which quarterback are you putting on bust watch?
I am going with the guy I had booming last week. I'm going with Dak Prescott. Chicago's pass defense ranks top 10 against the quarterback position. Last week, Dak, he did not look like he was 100%. He only threw for 200 yards and 1 touchdown. That's a Cooper Rush type stat line, and we never trusted Cooper Rush as a starter against any matchup over his 5 weeks. This is the starter over there. The Cowboys offense, it just does not look right, whether it be the quarterback position, whether it be the receivers, whether it be the health, because they have had a load of injury problems. They haven't had 1 week where they were all fully healthy yet. I do think it's going to take some time to get back to form. So I do think the game plan going into this week is going to be just go run the ball, go use Tony Pollard, like go make up your points that way, go win Sunday. Instead, and like I said, they've been dealing with injuries. Dalton Schultz has been hurt most of the year, like playing with injury or been out because of injury. Zeke's out, most likely out this week. Michael Gallup got put into the offense halfway through Cooper Rush's tenure. Noah Brown was dealing with an injury in the middle of one of the games. So they haven't had a full week to really be healthy. So I think they're just going to go try and win Sunday, and then they're going to go take their week off, reassess, and they will be better coming out after the bye.
All right. My bust of the week is Mr. Aaron Rodgers, who is about to get absolutely embarrassed on Sunday Night Football in prime time. This might be when Aaron Rodgers retires. He might pull an Antonio Brown and just walk off the field. Because Rodgers is facing the Buffalo defense, they're really. What's the number here? I know they're tough versus quarterbacks. What's the number? I'm sorry. I don't have the number in my notes for some reason. The Bills are the 4th best team against quarterbacks in fantasy football. They have not, Rodgers has not had a game over 16 fantasy points this season. And I think he averaged over 20 like his entire career. That's ridiculous. He hasn't had over 1 game over 20 fantasy points this season. On the year, Rodgers is the quarterback 11, which I guess isn't terrible. I had him outside my top 12, but I still don't think he finishes within the top 12. And that Buffalo defense, there's only one quarterback that scored over 13 against them, and that was Patrick Mahomes. Really bad matchup. The spread is 10.5, which feels like the biggest Aaron Rodgers spread ever. And in my spread pool, I'm tempted to just pick Buffalo. Like, Green Bay looks bad. Lazard is out with an injury. The other receivers are hurt. I think Cobb is out too. So it's like
Cobb's on the IR.
Rodgers just did a whole press conference saying he doesn't trust his receivers. So it's like, they're going to focus in on Aaron Jones as well. And Nick, I'm going to take this from you because I am doing a stack.
He brought the stack up.
I did because Nick had other running backs on there, and I don't like stacking, but I don't like Aaron Jones' matchup. In 4 of his 7 games, he's at 10 points or less. That means over 50%. He's not getting you double-digit fantasy points. That's not great. Now he's facing the Bills, who are also 4th best against the run. It's going to be a terrible game script because they're going to be down a lot of points. He could get some passing work, but I don't see how anybody on the Packers plays well in this game. I could put the entire Packers on my all-bust team, and I'm doing that. No Packer is beating their projection this week. So there you go. Who is your first all-boom running back since I jumped the gun on that?
My all-bust running back is it's Najee Harris. I hate busting Najee because I was so high on him going into the year. I know there's so much talent in him, but he is playing behind the worst offensive line in football. It's like playing Madden Mobile, and I know some of you out there have done this. A couple years ago, you snap the ball with the quarterback, and magically your whole offensive line falls over, and you have 4 guys in your face. It's like the most brutal feeling in the world. Najee is getting hit on average behind the line of scrimmage. There's only 3 running backs in the NFL that have exceeded 50 carries that have that right now. So, it's really bad for Najee's offensive line. He hasn't exceeded 90 all-purpose yards this year, which is absolutely ridiculous because he's just not getting usage in the passing game like he was last year. The offensive line has been worse than it was last year. His quarterback doesn't check down to the running back. And the workload's good. He has 100 carries this year. So, that's a plus. But now he gets to run into Mount Rushmore, the front seven of the Philadelphia Eagles, which on average, I actually looked this up, the 4 defensive linemen average 6'7", 300 pounds. No one on that offensive line is going to stuff those guys. It's a terrible matchup. There will be no good game script for him, and I think he should be benched in every single league.
All right. Solid points all around on that. For my second running back bust of the week, I have Nick's new running back, James Robinson. First off, it's his first game with the Jets. He has a couple of days to practice and learn the playbook, so it's not like he's getting thrown into the fire like McCaffrey last week. But it is still a new team and going to take some time to get his reps. With the Jaguars, though, his yards per carry in every advanced stat has gone down throughout the season. There's a reason why they were using Travis Etienne more. It wasn't just because of the draft pick. Robinson stopped. It was not looking good. That's a reality of the situation. On top of that, Michael Carter is supposed to be the heartbeat of that offense. So this could be a running back by committee situation, not just this week, but every week. I don't see James Robinson being the passing back. It's definitely going to be Michael Carter. So I don't know how much PPR value Robinson's going to have the rest of the season, especially this week. And why is this week so important? He is facing the Patriots defense, who has allowed the seventh most fantasy points. The seventh least amount of fantasy points to running backs. Bad matchup, running back by committee situation, and it's Mike LaFleur, right? Offensive coordinator.
Mike LaFleur.
He said today they're riding the hot hand. If they like Carter over there, then why would they not use more of Carter? So I think James Robinson is touchdown or bust, and I don't want that in my lineup. So I think this is not the situation you're looking for this week.
I agree with you on this.
So it's not an anti-Jets take, but it is not. I would rather play Michael Carter. I would not love to play Carter in this matchup, but rest of the season, I would take Michael Carter over James Robinson. Who is your first wide receiver boom of the week? Wait, no, running back. I'm sorry. We went out of order and I got flipped up. Your second running back boom of the week.
No problem. I'm going with David Montgomery. He's going up against the Cowboys, who rank number 1 against the running back positions. And as much as I hate to admit it, Justin Fields has looked pretty good these last 2 weeks. And the Bears are coming off a short week going up against Dallas. So what that tells me is here's the game script. Pass the ball. You're going to be checking down. Guess who had more receptions this year? Khalil Herbert had more receptions this season than David Montgomery. So in those passing situations, it's Khalil Herbert's backfield. David Montgomery and that team are still the number 1 rushing team in the league, which is kind of baffling. They have the most rushing yards in the league. But when you go up against the number 1 defense and your team, like if you're not Kansas City or Buffalo, maybe even like Minnesota and San Francisco, like I'm going to fade you if you're not like one of those elite offenses in the league. So I'm going to fade Montgomery this week. I do think there are better plays. I don't think the talent is good enough to exceed the situation over there. So I'll happily put him on my bench for other guys.
They're also not the most talented. He's not the most talented running back on his own team. Who did Brady just throw to you? I have the game on. I see it on my TV, and I have Chris Godwin, who just went like 30 yards, which is pretty neat. I would like him to score here. That'd be nice. All right. My first wide receiver boom of the week. I'm really excited to talk about this one because of the stats that I got. CeeDee Lamb. He's on one of my teams every single week. And Nick, I am begging you not to use CeeDee Lamb for my graphic because he's been my all boom graphic for 3 weeks in a row. And I feel like people get confused. And Nick has a really good rendering of CeeDee Lamb, which is nice, but he's on my team every week at this point. And I think I'm going to keep that trend going. I think I'm going to put him on my team every week. I'm just not going to tell you which team he's on until the week happens. So Nick, I'm restricting you from using CeeDee Lamb if that's okay for the rest of the season.
We'll see.
The way that we're doing all boom, all bust, guys, by the way, now is I do my all. Well, we'll switch it every week, but one of us does our all boom first, the other one does our all bust first. So we have different ones. But I think it's a funny bit that I've had CeeDee Lamb like 4 or 5 weeks in a row at this point. Anyway, there's a legitimate reason. Mike Evans, toe tat, is that score? I like updating you guys as a flag. Anyway, I'll update it. My favorite stats about CeeDee Lamb, right? He's facing the Bears defense. And I got to give Nick credit here because Nick is high on the Bears head coach, or higher than most people are. And I'm not sure he's too bad, and I'm not so sure the roster's too bad because the Bears have only allowed 4 wide receivers to go over double-digit fantasy points in ESPN standard leagues. Those 4 were Jacoby Myers with a touchdown, who only scored 11 fantasy points. So without the touchdown, not a good game. Justin Jefferson, who went nuclear. And I forget the other 2. I don't have them listed, but they weren't anybody special. Here are wide receivers who did not have 10 fantasy points against the Bears. Adam Thielen, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Brandon Cooks, any Packers wide receiver, any Giants wide receiver, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel. On top of that, the reason CeeDee Lamb is always on this list, in 3 out of 17 games this season, he's at over 15 fantasy points. The other 4, it's been under 14. He is a true boom or bust. And that's what this team is. That's what this segment's about. That's what this team is about. This week, he's a bust. Bear down, baby. I have a bet on the Bears this year. Go Bears. Who's your first wide receiver boom of the week?
I am going with Deontay Johnson here. I'm going to keep it the headline is very sweet. I'm fading the wide receiver against Darius Slay pretty much every single week. Once again, going up against the Eagles, not a very good matchup for your wide receivers. And here's some stats about Deontay Johnson, which have me very worried for his rest of the season. He has 0 touchdowns this year. He only has 1 game over 14 fantasy points. He's averaging under 9 fantasy points per game over the last 4 games. 3 of those have been with Kenny Pickett. The most yards he's had in any game this year is 84, which is his best game of the season. That came with Mitch Trubisky, his best game since he has not had any game over 60 yards since then. He's not getting nearly as much volume as he did last year or the last few years with Big Ben, or that he got with Mitch Trubisky early this year. And I'm very much going to have to fade Deontay Johnson the rest of the season, which I hate to do because I do think he's a top 10 talent at the position. But with that quarterback play and the brutal matchups that they have the rest of the year, like it is not a good situation for him.
I'm completely with you.
I think there's I know there's a lot of rumors swirling around that Chase Claypool is going to get traded. I wouldn't be surprised if Deontay Johnson was the one that got put on the move.
And if he went to a different team, like man, if he went to Green Bay, he might have.
He would be Devontae Adams over there.
Have Devontae Adams stats. I'm confident on that.
Yep.
He'd have more drops, but aside from that, he would have Devontae Adams numbers. Mm-hmm. My second wide receiver bust of the week is another perfect boomer bust candidate. He's Amari Cooper. It's who he is. Now, the thing is, he is playing at home, so I can't do Nick's favorite stat of playing an away game, unfortunately. However, facing those Bengals, 5th toughest defense against wide receivers, haven't allowed a touchdown in the second half to any position. On top of that, they've only allowed 1 wide receiver that plays on the outside to score to have more than 14 fantasy points in a game. That was Tyreek Hill, who's just a talent of all talents, a future Hall of Famer. On top of that, Amari Coopers have decreased every single week in the last 3 weeks. So I'm an Amari Cooper owner. I'm probably playing him, but I think he's going to bust this week. I'm not excited to play him. You may have to play him, but if you have other options, I would look to pivot off of Amari Cooper this week. Who is your second wide receiver bust of the week?
I got another one. You just said CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper for the perfect example of boom bust. Well, I got one for you. It's Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk has been the definition of boom bust. The first 3 games of the year has boomed. The last 4, or 3 of the last 4 has been a bust, and then 1 was an average game. Same thing as Amari Cooper. Through the first 3 weeks, he was absolutely dominant. We all fell in love with him, and we said they paid him for a reason. But since then, he's averaging less than 10 fantasy points per game. He only has 1 touchdown. He only has 1 game over 4 catches in that span. Like, it's an absolute formula for disaster. And the biggest piece of that puzzle is he's got Patrick Surtain on the other side of the ball from him. I know Surtain isn't as good as Sauce Gardner. A little shout out to my brother there who wanted to start that debate with me. But he is a very talented cornerback. So the only way that he's going to put up like his projection, which is double digits, is if he breaks off a big touchdown, which no receiver has done against Patrick Surtain in his entire career, or against Justin Simmons, their best cover safety. Or the Broncos are going to have to be completely demoralized, quit on themselves, which I do think is more possible than Patrick Surtain burning the touchdown. But I don't see the defense being demoralized. I think if anything, it's going to be that offense. You see those guys' body language. You don't see it on the defensive side of the ball. Those guys are celebrating. Those guys are hyped. That's a top 5 defense right there.
They look great. They look wonderful.
Denver's been great. So I think Christian Kirk, another guy where you probably started him every single week because of those first 3. I think this is the first time where I would genuinely feel comfortable benching him.
I did want to bench Kirk as well. Nick got him before I did because he did the busting first, but I agree with that. It's a bad play. I have Terry McLaurin. Terry had a good game last week. I think I may have busted him last week. He's another one that's always on one of my lists. But he's facing the Colts this week, who have allowed the second fewest points to wide receivers. I wrote that the Colts could look to control the clock with the new rookie quarterback, maybe use Taylor, but I did see a report earlier that they're excited I forget his name, Ellinger. They're excited for him to come in and believe his mobility can actually spark the offense. So I don't know. What if Sam Ellinger goes and shows out? But that doesn't change the fact that the Colts have a very good defense. And Terry McLaurin probably gets locked up. No wide receiver scored over 13 fantasy points against the Colts this season. So I don't see Terry doing that this week.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your first flex play? Terry was my first flex play. So who's yours?
I'm going with someone that, Nick, you have been 100% correct about this player. I don't say it often, but I am going to say it now. Brandon Cooks has been absolutely horrendous for fantasy.
Yeah, he's been
football.
Bad.
He's been really bad. The last 5 games, he only has 1 game over 10 points, and in none of those games did he get 60 yards. That one game where he had 10, he had a touchdown. And it's due to mediocre quarterback play. Brandon Cooks is another wide receiver that I think should be on the move this offseason, but he's been bad. His quarterback's been bad. That offense has been bad. That coaching's been bad. Like, the Texans have not been good. Brandon Cooks has not produced, and there's every reason to fade him. Like, there's going to be – I don't remember if we had him on the stash or trash segment this week, but he is definitely going to be a candidate for many.
All right. My second second flex bust of the week is Darrell Henderson. He did return to practice today, so it looks like he is going to play, but he should not be playing in your lineup. He's had less than 10 fantasy points in 3 of the 6 games that he's played in. Top of that, he's facing those San Francisco 49ers. Arguably the best defense in the league, second best team against the run in terms of fantasy points allowed. And the last time he faced the 49ers, just like 4 weeks ago, they only allowed 6.9 fantasy points to Darrell Henderson. So I don't see him getting any more than that number, unless he scores a touchdown, which he could, but I don't see this being a good game for Henderson at all. I would bench him.
Nick, I wasn't going to let it happen. I wasn't going to let the people think that Jacoby Myers would escape the all bust team this week.
I wanted to do it because the Jets defense is now one of my go-tos for the bust team.
It's my take. It's
your take. It is your take, but it's take.
I'll let you back me up. But I wrote some notes for this that I need to share.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. I don't have any notes. You have the notes. I don't.
Everybody thought Jacoby and those Patriots were going to get past the New York Jets in flying colors before the year. It ain't happening. Sauce is clamping that man's ass. There ain't no way Jacoby Myers is putting up a double-digit week. Nick, you want to know an interesting stat? I was low on Jacoby Myers. You were high before the year. He has double-digit points in every single one of his games. But guess what? You want to know what Sauce has done in the last 4 weeks since he finally got past that rookie shedding of the first 2-3 weeks? Last week, Cortland Sutton, 5.3. Week before, Romeo Doubs, 6 points. Jalen Waddle, week before, 5 points. Week before, Deontay Johnson, worst game of the year at 4 points. Sauce Gardner has been the number 1 cornerback in football this year. The only other person you could debate is Darius Slay. Nobody else has been as good, and this man's a rookie. Jacoby Myers is going to look like the Undertaker after losing this 10-point streak this week. It's over. It's over. The dead man of Sauce Gardner. He's going to be wearing a Patriot hat this week. He's going to be good old Uncle Sam this week. I know we all saw him with the cheese hat. We're going to see him with the big old poofy American flag hat. Sauce is clams. I love Sauce.
I'm just saying, if Jacoby Myers goes out there and does have double-digit fantasy points, I feel like I have to do something involving Undertaker for Monday's show. It's Halloween as well. Maybe I'll dress up. I'll dress up as the Undertaker. If I had the costume, if I had unlimited funds, I would ship myself an Undertaker costume and a Jacoby Myers jersey. I would.
You might be able to find it at a Spirit Halloween. That might pop up in
Listen, I ain't paying money for that. I wish. My tight end of the week, I wrote Raiders tight ends because I wasn't sure if Waller was going to play, but right now, if Waller doesn't play, it's Foster Moreau. I don't care which one it is, but we're going to go with Darren Waller for now. Saints have allowed the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Just last week, they faced Zach Ertz, who's had double the fantasy points in every single game except against the Saints. On top of that, Darren Waller is coming up that hamstring injury, and in the 6 games he's played the last 3 weeks, he's only had less than 6 fantasy points, which is really bad. Last week, Foster Moreau only had 5. So Foster Moreau plays. I don't care. He's still busted. So they held Zach Ertz to 3 points last week, which is phenomenal. So with all that said, I would look to play like Evan Ingram or the Broncos tight end, or maybe even Hayden Hurst. Like I would not play Darren Waller this week. This is a bad matchup. All right, you're up. You're tight end bust of the week.
I was thinking about it. I was like, damn, I might have to bench Waller because that was a very good take.
Uh-oh.
I'm very, very worried. I'm sorry, Nick. I gotta, before I say this, I'm sorry, Nick. I did not have any questions for you this week. I will be better next week.
Man.
I'm sorry. My tight end bust of the week is going to be Tyler Higbee. I'm very, very worried for him right now.
You're a Higbee guy too.
Yeah, I'm a big Higbee guy. I was a big Higbee guy last year. Not as high this year, but I still always loved him as a player. So I'm worried for him this week. I'm worried for him rest of the season. Last week, their offense moved the ball better than they did like prior to. They moved the ball to the receivers. They were a lot more efficient. They spread the love a lot more. And the biggest person that lost his target share was Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee was number 2 in targets at the tight end position before the bye week. And he walked out with only 2 targets in that game with 1 catch. It was his worst game all year. And after the bye, they're getting back Van Jefferson, who's their deep threat. They're going to be able to open up the field a lot more. It's going to be a very bad situation for him. He made up a lot of those points from tight end screens and 5-yard routes, which he'll still be able to do, but he's not going to get that volume that he was getting on the rest of the year. I'm very concerned, especially now that they're going up against San Francisco. Last week, Travis Kelce, he had a good game, but he didn't have a Travis Kelce game. It was his second worst game of the year. So you can't tell me Travis Kelce had his second worst game of the year and Tyler Higbee is going to have a good game. You're not going to be able to convince me of that. So I don't want to pivot off of Higbee because the workload has been there. But if you told me Greg Dulcich or Tyler Higbee this week, I do think I would go with Dulcich.
All right. Moving on to Flex on them. We give you 2 players, one from each side of the ball for each game. Let you know which one we'd rather play in our flex spot. Starting off at 9:30 a.m., the London game. Melvin Gordon or Travis Etienne?
I'll go with Travis Etienne. I think this should be a no-brainer.
Yep, I'm with you on Travis. Deontay Foreman, I think I'm saying that right. Deontay Foreman or Tyler Algier?
I'm going with Foreman here. He looks so good, and now he gets the Falcons. It should be a better matchup.
Yeah, I'll go with Foreman as well. David Montgomery or Tony Pollard? We're going to agree on all of these.
Did you know that these were my guys? I don't know, but I'm taking Tony Pollard.
Yeah, I'm taking Tony Pollard as well. How about another one? Darnell Mooney or Jacoby Myers? I guess you would say. Would you say? Darnell Mooney or Jacoby Myers? Who would you say?
Darnell Mooney. Well, they're not in the same matchup this week.
Oh yeah, that was last week. That's funny. I was trying to give another one for this one.
Okay.
Oh well. Jalen Waddle or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
This is a good one. I think I'll lean Waddle here, but I think both are phenomenal plays.
Yeah, I'll lean Amon-Ra because he's on my boom team, but good plays. Rondale Moore, who Nick's been pretty high on, or Adam Thielen?
Rondale Moore, absolutely. There's rumors now that AJ Green's going to get traded to the Packers, so we'll see.
I'll go with Adam Thielen, getting a touchdown this week. He gets in the end zone. Darren Waller or either of the tight ends on the Saints, whether that's Taysom Hill or Juwan Johnson?
I'd rather take the ceiling of Taysom Hill, but if I have to, if it's my actual decision, I can't bench Darren Waller for either of these two.
I'll bench Waller. Ramondre Stevenson or James Robinson?
I will take Stevenson over Robinson. I think. What if we did Stevenson or Carter?
Sure, I'll take Stevenson over both because the Patriots.
I would too, but I don't know. I don't think this is the Robinson week. I agree with you on that.
What about Carter or Damian?
I hate this next question. No, we got to skip. No.
What about Carter or Damian Harris? There's somebody that has to play one of them. I'd take Carter.
I would play Carter.
Najee Harris or Miles Sanders? Nick has to say something nice about Miles Sanders. He has a great matchup, so I'm putting Miles Sanders in there.
This is fucked up.
At the end of the year, we do a show of apologies, and I feel like Miles Sanders will get apologies from both of us.
Yeah, fine, Sanders.
All right. Moving on to the 4:00 games. Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks? Ugh. Bench both. Ugh. I'll play Cooks, but
I'll play
both
Cooks
really
as well.
bad. Terry McLaurin or Michael Pittman?
Pittman
as well. Great matchup. Almost made my all boom team. Brandon Ayuk or Allen Robinson, who had 16 fantasy points in his last game with the Rams.
Allen Robinson.
I'll play Brandon Ayuk.
If Debo's out, I'll play Ayuk.
I'll play Ayuk either way. I don't know who to put for this one, so I put Darius Slayton or Tyler Lockett, or Daniel Jones or Geno Smith.
I like that second one better. I know it's not flex, super flex him. I'll go Danny Dimes.
I'll go Geno. He's been great. I love me some Geno Smith. And the Sunday Night Football game, which is Aaron Rodgers' funeral, Aaron Jones or Devin Singletary?
Devin Singletary. I hate to say it.
I'll play Singletary as well, and I don't think I would have had this take 6 weeks ago, but here we go.
Yep.
All right. That is Flex on them. I'm sure you guys have a lot more flex questions or lineup questions, and the way to ask them and the best way to get them answered with a thorough answer is our Sunday morning show, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook, Primetime Fantasy Podcast, Twitter, PrimeTimeFFPod. That's where you find the live shows, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, Sunday morning, right before the Denver versus Jacksonville London game. Come watch with us for an hour. Come ask some fantasy questions. We have a lot of fun with it. We'd appreciate you guys coming out to that. If you enjoyed the show and you're listening on an audio streaming platform, if you're on iTunes or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please drop a like on this video. We appreciate that. Hit the subscribe button. Share the link with your friends. Tell them to watch the Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Keep interacting with us on social media. Nick's going to have his really awesome boom bust graphics. And I'm not just saying that 'cause he's my friend. He really is doing an awesome job with all of our graphics. But we'll have our all boom and all bust teams up on our social media, PrimetimeFFPod on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok as well. Then Facebook and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys for listening to this show. Join us Sunday, 8:30 a.m. for the live. We'll see you there. Enjoy week 8.